Welcome back to another episode of APositive Insights. Today, Darren and I were joined by Nick Cox from The People Place. And this was a fascinating chat because Nick is one of the most organised people I've ever met. And in the lead up to launching his business, has really taken every step correctly. Darren, what did you take away from the chat today?
Yeah, no, I think just like you said, mate, Nick's, unlike a lot of recruiters that go out there, and he's really spent a lot of time, he's invested a lot of time and energy into just getting his processes and partners in place before he goes live. And I think you're going to see how that really impacts the launch. He's definitely going to hit the ground running. And I think startups and anyone considering setting up are going to get a lot from this. So, enjoy the listen.
Definitely couldn't agree more. And as always, guys, we're trying to grow the podcast and it is growing. So if you could please like, share, and especially on LinkedIn, it would be greatly appreciated. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of APositive Insights. Today we're joined by Nick Cox of the People Place. Nick, how you going?
I'm very well. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, very good to have you. Now, Nick, you're in the throes of starting up your own agency. What's the launch date, about a week or two away now?
I am mid-October. I've pushed it out slightly to give myself another week, mainly because I know once I'm up and running, that'll be kind of it, and I'll really be into it. So I'm actually going to take a week of holidays before I launch in about a week and a half's time, and from there, mid-October, get moving and go out through LinkedIn. I've got a press release I'm going to go to kind of industry publications with, and get moving from there.
Amazing. Exciting. Hitting the ground running.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, we always like to start our podcasts here by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a fact that other people may not know about you.
Yeah. I can be, I guess, pretty frustrating at times for colleagues and people around me with being quite obsessive with how I organise things and how I can be kind of overly structured. I was diagnosed with OCD a few years ago, so that kind of helped make sense of why I've been colour coding my wardrobe since I was a kid and on my desk at work.
My wife would love me to do that.
My old business partner laughed about it for years because everyone would leave at the end of the day and often him and I'd be working and I'd be going around to everyone's desks and like winding up their headphones and like reshuffling their papers and pens and a bit weird, but I suppose just wired that way.
I like it. Well, it's clearly been successful for you.
Yeah.
So we know you're new to the recruitment industry, but can you tell our listeners sort of what your background is and what led you to the recruitment industry?
Yeah, it's a bit of a unique one. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, including you guys. I'm reading a lot of books, and I haven't really heard of too many people that have started a recruitment agency having not worked in recruitment, which is probably a little bit odd. But about 8 years ago, I started a content agency with my business partner. Over the last maybe 2 years, we transitioned that content agency into a full-service creative agency and scaled the business quite quickly. So went from coming out of COVID, probably 6 staff, to having roughly kind of 23, 24 staff earlier this year. And I guess scaling the business so quickly, recruitment as operations director, recruitment became a huge part of my job, and HR and people and culture. I'd always enjoyed that side, but I guess having grown the business so quickly and that being kind of a focus on, or that being the focus of my job kind of day to day, I quickly figured out that I did really enjoy it, and I guess that's probably more so where my skills were in the kind of operations role, because prior to that I'd been kind of a hands-on producer pulling together ads and pieces of content for online and whatnot. So earlier this year, it was a tricky one because I really enjoyed being in that business. Jack and I had grown it from the ground up. Jack's brother joined, which then resulted in us transitioning into a full service agency. The business was doing better than it ever had before, but I kind of knew that I was like deep down ready to do something different and something on my own as well, to be honest. Might sound a little bit greedy, but to go out and do something that like I could just kind of run myself and maybe grow a little team over time. And look, I was, over the last kind of year, I've been thinking about it quite a lot, and I just kept coming back to recruitment. I'd spoken to a lot of agency owners, I'd done a lot of reading, as I said before, kind of listened to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books, and it really kind of made sense in terms of what I enjoy and what I'm kind of passionate about as well, to be honest.
Yeah, amazing. Like, you obviously at the start you were just introducing, like, it's all about preparation.
Yeah.
Like, how long did it take you to get to this point?
Yeah, look, it's a good question because I mean I've set up 2 businesses in the past and made a lot of mistakes and realised that it does take a lot longer than you would normally expect, particularly if you're trying to scale something. I decided to leave Sunday Gravy, my creative agency, in mid-March, I think it was. And initially I was going to give myself 3 months, kind of pull it all together. I thought in that 3 months as well, maybe 2 to 3 week holiday, get it all together. It won't be too kind of intricate. Even though I hadn't worked in recruitment before, I kind of thought couldn't be too difficult. I can do a bit of reading online, figure everything out and get it up and running. After about a month of speaking to a few different mentors, Ross Clennett being one as well, who I actually heard on another podcast, and again through a bunch of audiobooks, his name was mentioned a few times, and Greg Savage had kind of posted about him. So I contacted him and he was just incredible at he has been the entire way, but at the very beginning, making sure that I was kind of heading in the right direction and prioritizing the right things. And very quickly I realized that giving myself probably 6 months as opposed to 3 months was a far smarter move. Financially not ideal because I was kind of just eating into my savings, but it would ensure that the kind of the business plan, all of the forecasting, the direction I want to take it in, all of my internal and external process, templates, legals, financials, everything was like super buttoned down, and I was I'd ideally be really, really confident when I kind of launched, as opposed to maybe floundering a little bit, which looking back now would definitely have happened had I have launched after 3 months. I just wouldn't have had everything together and I wouldn't have felt, I suppose, as confident as I do now, really giving myself time and speaking to as many people as I can, kind of across the board, creatives, lawyers, accountants, CFOs, to make sure that everything is in the right spot, and I suppose as best as it can possibly be.
Yeah, amazing. I know you guys have had a lot of conversations around sort of that setup phase. I suppose that a lot of the key differences between what you've explained to a lot of, I'd say, early stage recruitment businesses, they probably don't spend as much time as you have in the preparation stage. Yeah. So that's pretty awesome to hear.
Yeah, look, I think it's probably a huge part of the fact that I have started 2 businesses in the past and made quite a few mistakes and been horrifically anxious as a result, and you have to kind of learn on your feet and figure things out and fix things, and I think that's kind of like the best way to learn, to be honest, kind of within reason, throw yourself into the deep end and kind of figure it out. So once I kind of laid everything out systematically for this business, I just made sure that I didn't make the mistakes that I suppose I've made in the past. And I think the biggest thing with any business, or just in business in general, is just having good mentors and having good people you can kind of lean into. And very cliche thing to say, but I don't think you can stop learning. Like, as long as you've got good people kind of across the board to lean into, you can figure things out. It's just making sure that you have the time and that you're not rushing yourself or rushing them.
Yeah, and passion, right? Like, you can hear it, the way you talk about it now, like, you're passionate about it, you want it to succeed.
Oh, definitely,
And that's so important. I suppose you've touched on it a few times, audiobooks, podcasts, Ross Clennett, obviously, getting a nice plug here.
Well, he was actually on our podcast last week.
Yeah, you guys mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
What other resources did you lean on sort of in the pre-startup phase and moving forward? What are you going to lean on?
Look, I guess when I started out, audiobooks. Audible was incredible. I bought like 9 books, hard copy books. I'm going to read these kind of back to back. I hadn't read in years. I used to read a lot when I was younger and thought I could kind of get back into it, and I just didn't have the concentration. So I got Audible, which I'd never really used properly before, but downloaded all those 9 books that I had actually bought as hard copies, listened to all of those, then from there kind of moved into the podcasts, listening to a few different podcasts. I spoke to agency owners kind of all over Australia, individuals that were running kind of mining agencies in Perth, to groups of friends that were running agencies in the PR area in Sydney, and just getting kind of as many nuggets as advice as possible. I guess, it's an industry whereby everyone's working across different markets, but give or take, the general setup and structure, if they're being run well, is quite similar.
That's so interesting. So do you just reach out to these people and they just were happy to share?
Well, look, I made sure that during the podcast, whoever it was being interviewed made a comment around, and I'm more than happy to help people who are... there might have been 1 or 2 that I contacted who were just hadn't made comments like that and just weren't really eager, didn't have the time to talk.
Well, that's amazing.
But I'd say majority of them were like, there was one guy who was incredible from WA. And I had a few questions for him, like, do you have 15, 20 minutes? He's like, yeah, of course, mate, give me a call tomorrow, Arvo. Ended up speaking for about 3 hours.
Wow.
I think he probably drank about 4 beers. He was sitting in this boardroom. Everyone had left and they were all locking up and turning the lights off. And he's like, no, I've got some more time, mate. So I just went through kind of like everything that I've been through with Ross and with a few other people. But again, he just had so many invaluable bits of advice that I was just kind of like able to kind of add to. And then, yeah, bounced off a few other agency owners as well. And then from there, because I've worked in advertising, I guess, in that world for quite some time, a lot of really good creatives, so like writers and designers and art directors who are able to help kind of structure not just, you know, the website and the content, the design, but I guess the story of the business. And with me leaving the business that I've had in the past, why I've moved into this space, how it's going to kind of work, the types of businesses I want to be working with, and really helping kind of make sense of that. It's very easy just to kind of like say it out loud, but to kind of put a story together, particularly across, you know, a pitch deck and a website and through all of your documentation to make sure it's all nice and beautiful and consistent. I've had like a lot of good people on that front who have helped, which has been, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, that's great. I'm interested to know, is there anything you were considering doing that you've now sort of stopped after having these conversations with these already people running businesses?
Look, there was one thing at the very beginning, which again, I'm so happy I didn't, and I just had the right advice. I was only going to work on, because it's just me to begin with, and look, I might grow a small team. I'll see how the first year goes. A part of me just kind of wants to keep it to me and have that kind of freedom as well. But I was just going to do perm, because I've realised, you know, with temp or with freelance in the advertising and production world, you need a labour hire licence and it can be very reactive. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll just purely focus on perm. But Ross, having worked obviously temp desks his entire life, along with advice from a few other people, they just said, I mean, the big one was, if the economy kind of bottoms out, you need to have that to sustain the business, but also to have a business that you maybe want to scale in the future or sell in the future, you need to have that kind of database or that network of freelancers, of temps to make it substantial. Otherwise, you've just got, I mean, you've really got nothing.
You're the business.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's just purely invoice to invoice, and then all of a sudden you stop and that's it. So
that's right.
Yeah, that was really invaluable at the beginning. Look, there've been a few other small things. Like, I had a mate of mine, I'd kind of pulled legals from a few different areas, and I had a mate of mine who's a lawyer pulling it all together, and he just said to me, I'd recommend you find a lawyer in the recruitment space who can really help you. Well, just make sure that everything across the board is, one, not kind of succinct and legal, but two, it's in the best possible spot for a recruitment agency, because he's never worked in the recruitment space as a lawyer. And Ross put me in touch with a guy called Martin who runs Ready, Set, Recruit.
Yeah,
and
we work with Martin.
Yeah, so again, Martin was just brilliant. Like, there was so much. Look, lawyers aren't cheap, but having even like the terms of business put together now the way it is, and having the rates set in a certain way, like that'll pay itself off so quickly. So I guess it's making those kind of like sacrifices financially at the beginning to have everything in a really great spot, as opposed to getting 6-12 months in and realizing that something's not right, or that it needs to be updated, and then all of a sudden having to
Yeah, no, makes sense. We also had Martin on the podcast as well recently.
Yeah, I think it's music to our ears, and certainly, I mean, we've been chatting for over 6 months, and you're taking everything on board that we want prospects to always take on board. It's amazing the amount of people we deal with that want to take shortcuts and oh, do I really need this? Do I really need that? And it comes back to bite them eventually. So it's nice for us to be working with someone who's so eager to do everything the right way, and it's going to serve you well. And we've seen it work for other people.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, even the one where, you know, you've already identified that if you're thinking about scaling and selling in the future, obviously not in the 3 to 5 years, but maybe longer term, that you do need a contract broker. It's one of those key pieces of advice that people, like we say, we speak to startups all the time, and they're always, what's the plan? Is it lifestyle business? Is it scale it? Generally, most of them want to sell the business, but they want to do perm only.
But that's the advice I was given as well. It's like, if you want a lifestyle business right now, great. But what about in 5 years' time, if you want to hire staff and onboard them properly, and then 15 years' time you want to try and sell it, all of a sudden it's too late. So I guess getting those things right from get-go. That's another thing Ross was actually great with, was telling me to get an initial process together, and then we'll work through it kind of one-on-one. So the internal process, the external process, all of the templates that are involved throughout that, and then making sure that I guess anything that is client-facing is just coherent, it's distinct, kind of branded, and not all over the shop. I've definitely worked with recruiters in the past where, you're receiving documentation that isn't very clear and it can become really frustrating. So that's something that I've made like a real effort with, again, working through kind of the process and the templates to make sure that everything was, the best it can possibly be, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really good setup you've got. I suppose you've touched on a few areas, and it can be quite overwhelming setting up a recruitment agency. If you had to sort of narrow it down to 2 or 3 really important considerations you have to make for anyone out there thinking of starting a recruitment agency, what would you say are really integral parts?
I think with any business, having the first thing I think anyone should do really, which I'm sure is taught in business school, I've never been, but having a business plan. So working with, again, as many kind of mentors and individuals as you can to help kind of pull that together, and then have that almost as a Bible to kind of refer back to, particularly when you're setting up the business, however long that does take, but to have something to refer back to make sure that everything is, well, that you're not going off track essentially, and that everything is kind of consistent and in line with what you've kind of planned initially. The other big thing, which is a really obvious one, but just having like a WIP document, like a work in progress document. And I'm someone that can jump around far too much and get far too distracted. And so when I set this up, I just decided when I pulled the kind of WIP document together with the priorities for each day, each week, each month, that every single night from when I decided to kind of start this, I would plan my next day and kind of just stick to that and make sure that everything in the WIP document was tracked in terms of links through to live documents or decks that I was working on, who across those documents or decks was kind of assisting me, what was the kind of cost there, and making sure that everything was tracked really closely. Because that's another thing, I think, again, whatever business you're setting up, if you're not kind of on the ball on that front, you can lose track of financials so quickly, and I've done that in the past, and that can be a bit of a nightmare and just very stressful, and make something that should be like a really exciting, adventure quite kind of panic-stricken. So having a business plan and just having a really clear kind of, a WIP document or whatever it be, like, a Monday.com, whatever it be, to kind of plan out your days, your weeks, your months, and leading up to a launch date. And to have that from get-go, I think it's again, just far more kind of coherent to know kind of like where you're going and how long it's going to take.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose you're wearing many different hats, and you say you're planning your days. And each day, has that been a bit of a dynamic process? Have you something worked in the first 1 month? Is that now changing now that we're in sort of month 5 and 6? Or has it been pretty consistent throughout?
No, look, I mean, there's certain things that have been far easier than I was expecting. And on the flip side of that, there have been other areas that have been, far more difficult and far more time consuming. There are also a few things that I put together kind of initially that I kind of signed off and were happy with, that kind of a month or two later, again, after reading and listening and speaking to so many different people, I decided to kind of go back and revise. So I think that's another thing, is giving yourself time to put something together, and look, not consistently go back to it for 4 months, and it's never right, because that also isn't the best approach, but to give yourself time to go back to, again, whether it's your forecasting or your outgoings, everything you're going to be putting through the business, or legals or financials, to be able to kind of refer back and make sure that everything is in line with that initial business plan that was put together, and then kind of straying off in random directions across any of those kind of key areas. Yeah,
for sure.
Are you I suppose you obviously mentioned Ross, Martin, you outsourcing marketing? Like, is there any other areas of the business that you're outsourcing?
Yeah, I have. After, again, listening to quite a few podcasts, I kept hearing VAs, virtual assistants for particularly one-man bands were quite popular. There were people kind of operating, they were referring to kind of, 10 years ago, 7, 8 person agencies that were now being run by one individual here in Australia with 3 VAs kind of offshore, and it was working really well, super efficient. So I looked into that and came across a guy named Rodell, who's based in the Philippines, who is overqualified for the work he's doing. He's absolutely brilliant, but he's been helping with just lead generation through LinkedIn, so kind of building out a huge network of candidates and clients, using a few other bits of software to kind of get all the details and pull everything together. But he's been invaluable. The other one is Harry. So Harry and I first met maybe 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah, a while ago now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And had a chat. I'd looked into APositive. Again, I'd heard about APositive multiple times, and having read Greg Savage's book and kind of followed his blog, APositive was popping up all the time, and I'd read and heard quite a lot of very positive reviews as well. So
great.
Through that, met Harry, kind of hit him up. We went out for a coffee, had a chat, and I mean, from there, I annoyed you with kind of far too many questions outside of APositive, just in terms of recruitment. But Harry was extremely helpful and very generous with his time, so I did really appreciate that.
That's good. That's good to hear.
Set everything up with APositive. Again, when I decided at the very beginning to do, based on Ross's advice, kind of temp or freelance, I realised that it wasn't realistic right now to do that kind of in-house. So, I mean, that's when I looked into APositive. Harry and I had a chat, and then, kind of signed up to everything very quickly, easily, efficiently, and that's all kind of set up and ready to go. I think the payroll team, they got everything together really quickly. Like, when are you going to first, kind of start billing? And I was like, well, the business hasn't launched for 3 months, but I just wanted to get everything together. Okay.
They're not used to people being that prepared, right?
No,
Normally.
Like, why you contacted us so early? Anyway, look, it was all set up and ready to go quite quickly, which is great.
Yeah, honestly, like I said, you're not completely different breed to most agencies that we support. Like, normally they wait until they get a placement and then they want us to get everything set up. But we always say, let's be strategic, let's get it set up in advance. So you've got your credit checking, you've got your payroll team set up, you've got everything you need to then go and hit the market, whereas a lot leave it to that. You had one this morning that sent for a placement that starts today, and they haven't even really got anything set up yet.
Yeah.
But we will turn it around quick enough. But it's good to be strategic and prepared. So that's good to hear.
There's definitely a lot I'm not great at, but I am very much kind of process driven, and again, being a bit kind of obsessive, I just wanted everything there ready to go, and otherwise it's kind of just in the back of my mind and sitting there. But awesome. Very happy I got it done.
I think it's a common theme in all of these podcasts. I remember the very first one that we recorded, it was outsource everything you're not good at. And if you can identify...
that really resonated with me.
Yeah, if you can identify what's... what you're not good at, it's not a bad thing. It's just, you're going to set yourself up for success moving forward. So, there's people out there to assist you, and it's really important to use them. Yeah,
no, I couldn't agree more. I think it's being like both kind of like self-aware and also just smart with your time. So you end up doing things that you're not great at, takes twice as long, you're probably doing 50% of the job.
It actually costs you more as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that was, a great example, obviously, being, as we've said, APositive, and same with the VA. I mean, if I had sat there doing the work that he was doing, it would have taken me twice as long. I would have spent probably 2 months straight doing that, and then just decided to go and do something else because it would have burnt me out. So,
Yeah, no, great.
Yeah, brilliant. I suppose it's a good segue into our final wrap-up question. We always like to ask our guests, what's the one piece of advice you would give to anyone just recently going out on their own, but I suppose in your case, thinking about going out on their own, and especially from an unrelated industry?
Look, I'm definitely repeating myself here, but I think mentors, just learning and research. So again, audiobooks, podcasts, whatever it be, and then mentors, whether it's a paid business coach or people that are running businesses with the industry you're moving into, other recruitment agency owners that are willing to give up a bit of their time, which surprisingly there are like a lot of, if they're not too busy, if they can kind of make that work, and particularly if you give them enough time, which I learned. I was contacting people and saying, hey, do you have time in an hour or two? They're like, yeah, how about next week? I was like, yeah, fair enough. But yeah, definitely people in the industry, as I said, podcasts, books, and the other one would be, or the two that I mentioned earlier, I think just having a really clear business plan at the very beginning, really putting the time into that, again, tapping in the right people to make sure that is as good as it can possibly be. And then from there, making sure that you've got a really clear kind of, again, WIP document, checklist, whatever it be. It can be so basic, as I said, mine's in a spreadsheet, but just something that you can be kind of referring back to, and that is kind of like physically in front of you, that you can be clicking into every 45 minutes to make sure that you're, timing your day. I feel like you can just be so much more efficient with your time. I mean, I'm probably a little bit too obsessive where I actually block out my diary as well with just internal tasks.
I've literally just started doing it.
It's so good. It honestly, like, because you hold yourself accountable. Because rather than, I've been working from home as well, so I'll go and like make the bed, and then I'll go and like, I might have I've got lunch now, but I might
never make the bed.
I might have some cereal, and then I'll like it's so easy to get distracted. So to hold yourself accountable, I think, is a big one as well. Particularly when you're working by yourself, because it's very easy just to be like, I'll do it later today, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week.
Yeah, brilliant.
Love it. I think this has been really valuable, Nick. I think this will help a lot of people thinking about going out on their own. So thank you for giving up your time as well.
Thank you for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.